Over the last year, I grew a love for the smaller, somewhat niche side of video games while trying to clear my backlog. To some success. Cult classics, games that fly under the radar, and maybe a ROM hack and a fan game here and there. Sometimes they stand out for a fun gameplay loop. Sometimes it stands out for its absolutely bizarre world that just gets weirder as you push under the surface. And sometimes it stands out for both. Elin, the Eternal League of Nephia, is that third one. Elin is a sequel, or prequel, depending on who you ask, to Ilona, a sandbox JRPG with light roguelike elements that have a taste for blood. It doesn't just take the abnormal and make it moderately normal, it's treated like an everyday occurrence, with telepathically communicating animals, snails the size of your head, and gods that like to occasionally murder you for the lulz. However, Ilona's a bit hard to recommend, as it's bogged down by an archaic control scheme you can't edit unless you play with a controller, and mechanics that would take a long time to understand on your own, sometimes even when you have a guide. To be fair, it is a game from a different time, and some people do enjoy that trial by fire, but I have a feeling that a lot of people, especially nowadays,
just goes down the fucking drain because I accidentally aggro 3 fucking nerds!
Won't be as thrilled by it. So why am I talking to you about its sequel/prequel, Elin? Simply because it has something that Ilona doesn't. Quality of life and accessibility. Comparatively, the onboarding process is much smoother without being too linear, and this game focuses on improving and further expanding the past game's mechanics, while also standing to be a bit more visually interesting. By that last point, I mean the game still looks kinda simple, but at least you have a better idea of what you're looking at. The game also has a built-in FAQ if you really get stuck, ranging from all sorts of great advice like try to mix certain race and class combinations for more health, and what is essentially get good. Your main goal, by whatever means you prefer, is to persist, survive in a world that's constantly getting more and more dangerous by the day through any means necessary. This could be through gear upgrades made by you or found in dungeons, a home to isolate yourself from the world with, stealing, or at least trying to steal from others, or people you can recruit to do the fighting for you. If you go with that third option, do make sure to feed them occasionally, or they're likely to burst spontaneously into meat. The story is not really the main focus, even if it seems like it. Things happen, there are established characters, and there is a plot, kind of, but you're basically a background character for the most part, and it gets overshadowed by all the, other things that can happen. When you load into the world, you're given a rudimentary tutorial on the basic stuff, like gathering, making a home, eating, dying, and then you're just kinda off. A weird fairy occasionally chimes in to tell you of a new thing when you come across it, but for the most part, you're gonna learn on your own, and sometimes the hard way. For example, the surprisingly in-depth and somewhat tedious crafting system. Crafting is a multi-step process from hell. You want to make a wall? Make a workbench, and you can make grass walls with it. Want to make walls that aren't just grass? Well, then you're gonna need a sawmill and a stonecutter on hand, chop trees to convert logs into planks, pick up rocks to convert into stone, find vines in the forest and big leaves from a beech tree to make rope, and finally, you can make a wall workshop. Then you need to get more logs to convert them into planks, and then you can make wood walls. And if you don't have these tools on hand in the first place, expect a much bigger shopping list. You can also find these crafting stations in town, but you're going to be doing a lot of legwork already. You probably shouldn't add more just by having to go to a certain town. Or do! If you don't feel like making these items yourself for some reason, you can do quests to occasionally get town-specific furniture tickets. Build up enough, you can straight up take any furniture item out of that town, including crafting tables. This is kinda how it goes for crafting a lot of things. To make some of the more advanced stuff, like metal weapons and armor, you'll need to make a drafting table. Then still go get the resources to make the anvil, smelter, and then more resources to make the item. You need crafting tools to make more crafting tools to make items. You also have an energy meter that determines how much you can do before you have to sleep. You could try to ignore it, but you'll just kill yourself from overworking. And while it does increase as you level up, crafting can take a lot of energy starting out, so you'll be spending several in-game days, if not weeks, making these things. Several days of cutting wood and picking up rocks, only interrupted by eating and sleeping, and the occasional tax bill. Aside from just surviving, every month you get a tax bill in the mail. If you don't pay it by a certain amount of time, well, let's just say the government won't like that.
Tax time!
How much?
Secret.
Why?
Just guess.
$600?
Jail.
How do you afford paying taxes? Well, you could turn your land into a farm by growing livestock and vegetables and selling them in a delivery box. If Mystery Dungeon is more your thing, you can make your living by dungeon delving and selling the loot you find there.
God damn it.
What was that? Kamikaze?
Oh my god!
Is that just like a little goblin with like a stick of dynamite? What would drive him to do such a thing?
I'm scared of finding out. I think we should just go this way.
You can do quests ranging from odd jobs like getting people from one place to another, to killing random things you find in the forest ranging from human to snail, and sometimes acquiring very questionable items and paraphernalia for your local cat.
I need a handgun for a small errand. What does a snow petite need a gun for?
There's also quests where you gather a certain amount of crops and weight within a time limit, and performance shows where you need to play music and achieve a high enough score, assuming the audience doesn't pelt you with rocks and vomit on you for how bad your performance is. Seriously, if you want a hard mode, just be a musician. Even your followers will hate your performance. I have a No one gives a fuck! And that is a segue into making your character. You're brought to a character creator screen when making a new playthrough. Think about the kind of character you want to lean towards being, because there's a few things that carry a lot of weight on how you'll be playing, at least in the early stages of the game. For example, your race, including but not limited to a few flavors of human, Elia's elf equivalent slain by said humans for hiding away from a war they were supposedly expected to help out with, chaos shapes which actively mutate and gain new body parts at random and also start with less as a result, and snails. If you absolutely hate yourself and want to know what it's like to melt in salt, meaning you can finally know what true oppression really is. There are also classes, and while that's equally important and determines a good part of your stats and abilities, if you put time and effort into it, you could theoretically be good at anything. Though some classes do have more unique traits about them, like the witch for example, purely because they have a trait that's listed as not implemented. If you want to learn a new skill, you have to locate the specific trainer that will actually teach you, and then you can further invest into that skill to raise your potential with the skill. It doesn't level it for you per se, but rather it increases on how fast you can level it. The game also has a toggle to add more races and classes, which should honestly just be enabled by default. There's also a couple other things that add flavor text to your character. One of these things is an alias the game randomly generates for your character. You can reroll it at any time, and while I'd prefer to have an option to make my own, the random ones are interesting sometimes. They can range. Let's just say, sometimes I can't tell if the alias generator is being silly or homophobic. For my main playthrough, I went with an Elia priest who's less devoted to their god and more so a hopeless romantic that ends up swooning over whatever pretty face she sees next, and then fall asleep for 10 hours. In other words, I picked the priest for the stats. Don't know if I'd recommend it for a first playthrough. You're very frail and most melee weapons are a lot worse simply because of low strength and dexterity. But sometimes you can dream of magic and gain more spells, and magic is pretty strong and varied, so that's neat. That being said, all hail the Amber Booty and the bountiful harvest it may bring in the form of a lot of dead bodies. I only really have 2 complaints about the game, and they might be nitpicks to some extent, but I should probably bring it up anyways. Firstly, ChatGPT. It's a tad irksome they didn't hire an actual translator for it, but as far as I'm aware, the devs only used ChatGPT to translate patch notes. Someone might say they couldn't hire a translator, but the devs aren't translating the game themselves. Who is? That being said, you'll still sometimes run into untranslated text, and it's not like they're pro AI either, I don't think. They have a tab in the credits prohibiting the use of their art for AI. Again, it's kind of minor, I guess, especially since it's just something people read once, if at all, then never again, but AI is just becoming so much more prevalent, but I really just don't want to see it replace a career or an industry for that matter. The other thing, I kinda wish there were more race-specific portraits. You have a lot of classes and races to choose from that are all pretty varied, but you still end up having to look like a human. It'd be pretty cool if you could actually look like a snail when you picked it, or have a portrait that resembled it at least. That being said, there's a surprisingly active modding community, and if it's not there, it'll probably be a matter of time until you can install a mod to have the most authentic snail experience possible. The game is $20 in USD on Steam, but there's also a demo you can try if you're not quite sold on the game, and the demo is basically the game, but with the main restriction being a level cap. It's in early access, but it feels like there's a huge chunk of content here already, and it'd be easy to drop a few hundred hours or so. When I realized I ended up dropping 50 within the first week of me playing and feeling like I hadn't even scratched the surface of what there is to do, I felt like I had to talk about it. It's a weird ball of things, but despite its simple appearance, Elin's pretty fun, and I'm hopeful to see what comes next when the game's finished. With all this out of the way, I should end by saying this. I'm not a video game reviewer. I'm just a cat on the internet that likes to play video games. I know this is very different from what I usually do, which is just make funny gameplay videos for the audience that I totally have. I simply wanted to break out of my comfort zone and try something a bit different. Another video like this might pop up someday, but for now it's back to work. And hey, if you stuck around to the end, thanks for watching. I don't know what video I'm gonna work on next. It's gonna be funny though, I hope. So, see you soon. Okay, bye.